The bullet didn't knock Amara Brooks off her feet. It was the man who fired it that did. She had seen the gun come up, a black shape in a gloved fist, rising fast from behind a parked delivery van. And in the half second before everything went white, she had one thought: wrong place, wrong night, wrong city. The round caught her in the left shoulder and spun her sideways onto the wet pavement. Cold shot up through her palms. The thermal bag she'd been carrying skidded 6 feet and stopped against a drainage grate. Steam rose from the bag's zipper. A ramen order. Table 4. The customer had already messaged twice. None of that mattered anymore. A man stepped out of the shadow of the restaurant's side entrance. Tall, in a dark overcoat, moving with the stillness of someone who had walked through violence before and never once broke stride. He looked down at her. Not with horror. Not with guilt. With something she couldn't name. "Who shot you?" he said. Not a question, a demand. Amara couldn't answer. The cold was already climbing her arm toward her chest. "If that were you lying on that pavement, a stranger's war bleeding into your shoulder, a man you've never seen asking you questions you can't answer, what would you do? Stay with this story. Hit the like button if something about this already doesn't feel right to you, because it shouldn't. Drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now." The things coming in the next 4 parts. You won't want to miss a single one. The night had started the way most of Amara's nights in Seoul started, badly and getting worse. She had been on shift since 4 in the afternoon, which meant she'd eaten half a convenience store triangle kimbap, standing over a trash bin, outside a subway exit. She'd logged 42 kilometers on the delivery app, and she had 40 minutes left before the cutoff that would qualify her for the shift bonus. 40 minutes and 3 more orders. She could do it. She had been doing impossible math in her head for 3 years. That was how long she'd been in Seoul. 3 years of visa paperwork, 3 years of 12-hour shifts, 3 years of sending money home to Chicago every month without fail, without exception, regardless of what it cost her to keep the lights on in her own apartment. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, which she gave to Marcus, and a couch that had developed a specific depression in the shape of her back. She didn't complain about the couch. Marcus couldn't use the couch. Marcus couldn't use a lot of things. Her brother was 24 years old and had spent 11 of those years learning how to live inside a body that didn't always cooperate. The accident, a driver running a red light on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Marcus was 13, had left him with partial paralysis in his lower limbs and nerve damage that flared up every winter, which in Seoul meant it flared up for 6 months straight. He could walk, slowly, with a cane and good days. On bad days, he stayed in bed and pretended he was fine when she called. Amara always knew when he was pretending. She had a system for the calls. She'd ask what he had for breakfast. If he said eggs, he was okay. If he said he wasn't hungry yet, she knew to worry. That morning he had said he wasn't hungry yet. It was 11 a.m., so she'd taken the extra shift. She'd mapped her routes the way she always did, cutting through the quieter streets behind Gangnam's restaurant row, because the delivery lane was always jammed on Friday nights. And she knew a shortcut through the alley behind a cluster of high-end restaurants where the loading docks were empty after 9. That was her mistake. Not the alley. The timing. She'd come around the corner at 9:47 p.m. and walked directly into the edge of something that had nothing to do with her. But there were 3 men. She clocked that much in the first second. 3 men standing at the far end of the alley near the emergency exit of a restaurant called Sun, which she'd delivered to twice before, and which smelled like black garlic and expensive wine whenever someone opened the back door. 2 of the men were flanking a third, and all of them had the particular stillness of people in the middle of something they didn't want interrupted. Amara's instinct was to back up, turn around, pretend she hadn't seen anything. She was already turning when the shot came. It didn't come from the 3 men. It came from somewhere behind her. A cracked report, not as loud as she'd expected from movies, more like a firecracker going off inside a tin box. She felt the impact before she heard it fully, a punch in her left shoulder that lifted her slightly and sat her down hard on the wet pavement. Her thermal bag slid away from her. She watched it go. That was the strange part. Her brain kept cataloging small things. The bag. The steam from the grate. The sound of her own breathing, which had become very loud and very close. Then the man was there. He crouched in front of her, and he was close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes. Not soft lines. Nothing about him was soft, but the kind that come from years of reading rooms and calculating exits. He wore a dark coat. No tie. His collar was open one button, and there was something on his jaw. A bruise she'd noticed later, still fresh and purple, under the corner of his eye. "Who shot you?" he said again. "I don't—" She stopped, swallowed. "I don't know. I was walking. I was just walking." He looked at her shoulder. He looked behind her toward the street. He looked back at her face with an expression that was harder to read than anything she'd encountered in 3 years of trying to communicate across language barriers. It wasn't compassion exactly. It was assessment. But it wasn't cold either. He said something over his shoulder in Korean, short and sharp, and one of the 2 flanking men was already moving. "Don't," Amara said, louder than she intended. "Don't touch me. I need to call an ambulance. "If you call an ambulance," the man said, "there will be police." "Yes," she said. That's how it works." "And if there are police," he said, with exactly the same tone, "the men who shot you will know you're still alive, and they'll finish it." The alley was very quiet. Somewhere distant, Seoul made its nighttime sounds. Traffic, a delivery motorcycle, someone laughing on a high floor of the building above them. Down here, in this wet, narrow strip between expensive restaurants and loading docks, nothing moved. Amara looked at him. He waited. "Who are you?" she said. He didn't answer that. He stood up instead and said to his man in Korean something that ended in a word she'd learned in her first month. Pali. Fast. Then he bent and picked her up. Not roughly. Not gently either. Efficiently. The way someone lifts something they fully intend to carry to where it needs to go. Amara had one moment of pure, stupid instinct where she thought about fighting him, and then the pain from her shoulder lit up her whole left side, and she stopped thinking about much of anything. His name was Kong Min Jai. She wouldn't learn that for another 40 minutes. The car they put her in was black, obviously, because of course it was, and it smelled like leather, and something faintly metallic that she decided not to think about. One of the men, shorter, with a face like a man who'd heard bad news so many times it had become his resting expression, held a folded cloth against her shoulder with steady pressure while they drove. He didn't speak to her. He watched out the rear window the entire time. Amara held her phone in her free hand. She'd pulled it from her jacket pocket reflexively. The delivery app was still open, her pending orders blinking like a small accusation. The shift bonus timer was running. She had 31 minutes. She turned the phone over in her fingers and thought about Marcus, which was her version of panic. She thought about his voice that morning, not hungry yet, and about whether the heat in their apartment was working, and about the money transfer she'd scheduled for Monday that she hadn't confirmed yet, and about every small, unglamorous detail of a life she'd built out of necessity and stubbornness over 3 years in a city that hadn't asked her to come and wouldn't notice if she disappeared. That thought, the disappearing thought, was the one that finally made her hands shake. She closed the delivery app. She opened her contacts. She got as far as Marcus before the short-faced man, without looking at her, said in careful English, "Please, no calling." "My brother?" "Safe," he said. "He is safe right now. You call, it changes." She stared at him. "You don't know my brother." "We know," he said. "Please." The car turned. Seoul moved past the windows, all light and density. Thousands of people living their ordinary lives 100 feet from whatever this was. Amara put her phone in her lap and pressed her free hand flat against her thigh to stop the shaking. She was a food delivery driver from Chicago who'd moved to Seoul because of stupid instinct where she thought about fighting him, and then the pain from her shoulder lit up her whole left side, and she stopped thinking about much of anything. His name was Kong Min Jai. She wouldn't learn that for another 40 minutes. The car they put her in was black, obviously, because of course it was, and it smelled like leather, and something faintly metallic that she decided not to think about. One of the men, shorter, with a face like a man who'd heard bad news so many times it had become his resting expression, held a folded cloth against her shoulder with steady pressure while they drove. He didn't speak to her. He watched out the rear window the entire time. Amara held her phone in her free hand. She'd pulled it from her jacket pocket reflexively. The delivery app was still open, her pending orders blinking like a small accusation. The shift bonus timer was running. She had 31 minutes. She turned the phone over in her fingers and thought about Marcus, which was her version of panic. She thought about his voice that morning, not hungry yet, and about whether the heat in their apartment was working, and about the money transfer she'd scheduled for Monday. This will hurt. Hold still. The bullet didn't lodge. You're fortunate. She wrapped the shoulder, gave Amara 2 capsules and a glass of water, and left. Amara sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the capsules in her palm. She took them. Because the shoulder hurt, and because she was tired, and because at some point you had to decide whether you were going to fight every single variable or let 1 or 2 of them go. She'd been making that calculation her whole life. 20 minutes later, Kang Min-jae walked in. He looked different without the alley's shadows. Taller, maybe, or maybe it was the way he occupied the room. Not with aggression, but with the absolute unself-consciousness of a man who had never once had to wonder if he was welcome somewhere. He'd changed his coat. He held nothing in his hands. He sat down in the chair across from her, which was the right distance. Not intimate, not interrogation room distant. He looked at her shoulder, looked at her face. "How is the pain?" he said. "Better." "Beat." "What do you want from me?" He almost smiled, not warmly. It was more like the expression of a man who respected the question. "Honest." "I have no idea what happened tonight," Amar said. "I was doing my job. I want to go home. I want to check on my brother. If you want me to sign something or forget something or whatever the protocol is here, tell me what it is and I'll—" "The man who shot you," Min-jae said. "The man in the alley. Before the shot. Did you look at him?" She hadn't thought she had. But the question pulled something up. A half-second image, crisp the way things are when your body is already afraid before your brain catches up. A man beside the delivery van, standing still, his right arm raised, and on his wrist, where his sleeve had pulled back with the motion of lifting the gun. "A tattoo," she said. Min-jae went very still. "On his wrist," Amara continued. "It was dark, but it looked like a chess piece, like a castle. The kind that moves, a rook," he said quietly. "Yeah." She looked at him. "Why does that matter?" He was quiet for 4 full seconds. She counted. Then, "Because it tells me who sent him, and because it means that you, having seen it, are now a problem I have created." "I'm not a problem," she said. "I'm a person." "Yes," he said. And for the first time since the alley, something shifted in his face. Not softness, but recognition. "That is the actual problem." He told her some of it that night. Not all. She'd learn later that Min-jae operated the way he drove, in careful, controlled intervals, giving you just enough to keep pace, and never more than he'd decided you were ready for. The tattoo belonged to a man known in certain circles as the Black Rook, a contract killer. Precise, expensive, patient. The kind of person you hired not when you were angry, but when you had planned for a very long time. Someone had planned for a very long time. Min-jae didn't tell her his name that night. He didn't tell her who had hired this man or why. He told her only that she could not go home. Not yet. That her apartment had likely already been noted. That her brother— "My brother has nothing to do with any of this," Amar said. "He doesn't need to," Min-jae said. "He matters to you. That's enough." The sentence landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Amara heard it fully, not as a threat, though it was, but as a statement of mechanics. The cold, exact logic of how people with power hurt people without it. She knew that logic. She'd grown up adjacent to it. She'd moved across the world partly to outrun it. It had apparently been faster. "I need to call him," she said. Min-jae looked at her for a moment. Then he took out his own phone, said something brief into it in Korean, and handed it to her. "1 minute," he said. "Say nothing about where you are." Marcus picked up on the second ring. His voice was groggy. She'd woken him. That meant he'd been sleeping, which meant the pain wasn't bad tonight, which was the one piece of good news she'd received in the last 2 hours. She told him she was fine. She told him she'd had a work thing. She told him to keep the door locked and not to let anyone in tonight, phrasing it the way she always did when she needed him to do something without asking why. He said okay. He asked if she'd eaten. She said yes. She hadn't. She handed the phone back and looked at the far wall and did not cry, which was a choice, and which cost her something. Min-jae watched her. He didn't offer her anything. No comfort, no empty reassurance. That might have been the thing that kept her from completely unraveling. An empty reassurance right now would have broken something in her. His silence was somehow more honest than anything he'd said. "How long?" she said. "I don't know yet." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He stood. "You'll sleep here tonight. Tomorrow I'll know more. Tomorrow I'll tell you more." He walked to the door. She watched his back. "Hey," she said. He stopped. "The man in the alley." Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. "Was he trying to kill you or me?" Min-jae looked back at her. His face was unreadable in the way of men who have spent years learning to make it so. "Me," he said, and he missed. "Yes." "And the bullet hit me instead." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Okay." He waited, as if he thought there might be more. There wasn't. She'd asked the question she needed answered. Everything else was tomorrow's problem. He left. She lay back on the bed, fully dressed, her shoulder throbbing in the particular rhythm of things that had been damaged and would take time to heal, and she stared at the ceiling of a room that wasn't hers, in a building she hadn't chosen, inside a life that had taken a hard left turn at 9:47 p.m., in an alley that smelled like ramen and something she still couldn't name. Marcus had asked if she'd eaten. She almost laughed. Then she didn't because her shoulder pulled, and because laughing alone in a stranger's room at midnight felt like a thing she couldn't afford to give herself right now. She closed her eyes. She didn't sleep for a long time. She woke up at 5:14 a.m. because the heat clicked on and made a sound like someone clearing their throat, and her body, which had been coiled around the shoulder pain all night, snapped alert before her brain caught up. For 3 seconds, she didn't know where she was. Then she did. The room was exactly as she'd left it. Chair, table, the medical kit still open on its side, a glass of water someone had left on the nightstand while she slept. She sat up and moved her shoulder experimentally. It pulled. A hot, specific ache radiating from the bandaged point outward, but manageable. She'd worked through worse on less sleep. She went to the window. The view was a courtyard, stone, pre-dawn gray, 2 men in dark coats standing at opposite corners. Neither of them was pretending to be anything other than what they were. That was almost a relief. She'd been in enough bad situations to know that the ones where everyone was pretending were always harder to read. She used the bathroom. She found a folded change of clothes on the shelf, a plain black sweater, dark trousers, socks still in packaging, and stared at them for a moment with an expression that anyone watching would have read correctly as, "So you had my size." She changed, because her own clothes smelled like the alley, and she needed to be functional, and because being particular about dignity right now was a luxury she couldn't afford. She came out and sat on the edge of the bed and thought about Marcus. Not emotionally, practically. The way she always thought about him when things were bad. As a logistics problem, because logistics problems had solutions and emotions just had more emotions. He had food through the weekend. She'd stocked the kitchen Monday. The pharmacy refilled his prescription auto on the 15th. The building had a super who'd helped him twice before when the elevator was out. He had his phone charged. He knew not to open the door. She ran the list twice. Checked the gaps. Found 2. He didn't know where she was, and she didn't know if the people who'd shot her had already been to her building. That second gap was the one that made her jaw tighten. She heard the knock at 7:30. One knock, not a question. "Come in," she said, because she was Amara Brooks, and she was not going to pretend she had anywhere else to be. It wasn't Min-jae. The short-faced man from the car. She'd find out his name was Cha Dong-hyun, Min-jae's head of security. But at this point, he was still just the man with the bad news face who'd held her shoulder all the way here. He carried a tray, rice congee, a soft-boiled egg, hot barley tea. He set it on the table and didn't leave. "He's asking to see you," Dong-hyun said. "When you're ready." "I'm ready now." "Eat first." She looked at him. He looked back, entirely unmoved. She ate. The congee was plain and very hot and exactly what her body needed, which annoyed her in a specific way she couldn't quite explain. She drank the tea standing up. Dong-hyun walked her through the house, which in the morning light revealed itself as larger than she'd registered last night, and considerably less flashy than she would have expected from, she turned the phrase over in her head, a man like that. No obvious displays. No gold. The walls held a few pieces of art that looked old and serious, not decorative. The floors were pale hardwood. It was the house of someone who had stopped needing to prove anything, which told her more than the two guards in the courtyard had. Min-jae was in a room that was half office, half something else. A long table, paper sorted into precise columns, 3 phones lined up on the left side like he'd been working since before she woke up. He probably had. He looked the same as last night, except that his collar was closed now, which made him look more like the version of himself the world probably saw. He gestured to the chair across the table. She sat. "Your brother is fine," he said immediately. "We had someone watch the building overnight. He's fine." "You had someone watch my building?" "Yes." "Without telling me. You were asleep." She breathed through her nose. "That's not the point." "I know," he said. "The point is that I did it without your permission. You're angry. You have a right to be." He met her eyes directly, which she noted. A lot of powerful men she'd dealt with found reasons not to do that. "I need you to understand that your anger and the necessity of what I did are both true at the same time." Amara looked at him for a moment. "You're very good at explaining why you've already done something." "I've had a lot of practice." It wasn't quite a joke. She didn't quite smile, but the temperature in the room shifted by a small, measurable degree. She put her hands on the table. "Tell me what's happening." "What?" He told her more this time. "Not everything." She could sense the edges of what he was withholding the way you sense a wall in the dark. But more. The Black Rook's real name was Han Jun-seok, 41 years old, former military, 4 confirmed contract kills across 3 countries, and an unknown number that weren't confirmed because the clients paid enough to keep them that way. His signature, the chess rook tattoo on his right wrist, was known to approximately 30 people in the Asian criminal world. Amara was now one of them. That was the problem. Min-jae explained it without drama, which somehow made it worse. Jun-seok was meticulous. He didn't leave witnesses because he didn't make mistakes. The fact that Amara had seen the tattoo and was still alive was an anomaly the man would need to correct. Not immediately. He was patient, but eventually. "Who hired him?" Amara said. Min-jae paused. That pause was a sentence in itself. "Someone from your past," she said. "Not a guess. A read." "His name is Park Do-hyun," Min-jae said. "We had conflict several years ago. He lost considerably." Define considerably. His empire, his alliances, his standing. Min-jae said it without satisfaction, which surprised her. Most men described winning like that, with at least some residue of pleasure in their voice. He sounded like a man reviewing a balance sheet. "He's been quiet for 2 years. Last night was his message." "That message almost killed me." "Yes, I'm aware." He looked at the table for a moment. Do-hyun isn't careful. He's angry. Angry men hire people to send messages and don't always think precisely about collateral. "Collateral?" She let the word sit. "Is that what I am?" "No," he said. And the speed of that answer was faster than everything else he'd said, which she filed away. "You are an innocent person who was in the wrong place. What happened to you is a consequence of choices I made years before you arrived in this country." The honesty was disarming, which she suspected he knew. She kept her face even. "So what happens now?" "Now," he said, "I fix it." That's not an answer either. "No," he agreed again. She was noticing he agreed when he was right. "I'm going to find Jun-seok. I'm going to find the chain between Jun-seok and Do-hyun, and I'm going to end this." "How long?" "Days. Maybe a week. And in the meantime, Marcus and I stay here." She opened her mouth. "I know," he said. "I know what you're going to say." "I don't think you do. You're going to say that you didn't choose this, that you have a life, that your brother has routines and needs that don't pause for—" "I was going to say," Amara said, with a precision that stopped him, "that if Marcus stays here, I need to be the one to bring him, not your people, me. He doesn't know these men. He doesn't know you. If he wakes up and there are strangers at his door, he will—" She stopped, recalibrated. "It won't go well." Min-jae looked at her. "I need 1 hour," she said. "Your driver takes me to my building. I get Marcus. I bring him back. 1 hour." The pause this time was different, longer, working something through. 2 of my men go with you, he said. Fine. You don't stop anywhere else. I wasn't planning a detour. And you don't tell him what happened to you. He said it carefully. What he knows, he can be asked about. The less he knows, the safer he is. Amara looked at him. She didn't agree with the logic. She almost never agreed with the logic of keeping Marcus in the dark about anything, because he was 24 and sharper than people gave him credit for. But she recognized that Min-jae was not wrong, exactly. He was applying his world's rules to her situation. She could argue the philosophy later. Right now, Marcus needed to be in this building. Okay, she said. She stood up to go. Amara. She stopped. It was the first time he'd used her name. She'd told it to Dong-hyun in the car, and apparently it had moved upward through whatever chain operated here. She turned. I'm sorry, Min-jae said. For last night. For all of it. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Sorry is what happens after, she said. We're still in the middle. She walked out. The drive to her building took 22 minutes. Dong-hyun sat beside her. Another man, younger, with a jaw like a brick, and the quiet of someone who'd been trained not to react, rode in front. Amara watched her neighborhood come back into view through the car window and felt the specific ache of seeing something ordinary after something extraordinary. The convenience store on the corner, the laundry machines visible through the ground floor window of her building, a kid on a bicycle wobbling up the ramp. Normal. All of it normal. Her life going on without her. She went up alone. She'd made that clear, and Dong-hyun had accepted it after checking the stairwell himself. She knocked on her own door with her own knock. 3 short, 1 long, the code they'd invented when Marcus was 16 and going through a phase of not opening the door for anyone, and heard his voice from inside, "Hang on." The door opened. Marcus Brooks was tall. People always underestimated him because of the cane and the slow way he moved, and that underestimation made him quiet around strangers and sharp around everyone else. He had their mother's eyes and their father's jaw, and a stubbornness that was purely his own. He looked at Amara for exactly 1 second before his expression changed. What happened to your shoulder? I'm fine. You're holding yourself sideways. Marcus, you called me from someone else's phone last night and you're wearing clothes that aren't yours. He stepped back from the door. Get inside and tell me what's going on. She came in. She sat on the couch that had the depression shaped like her back. She told him as much of the truth as she'd decided to tell him, that she'd been in the wrong place during an altercation, that she'd been hurt, that the people involved were dangerous, and she needed them both to be somewhere else for a few days. Where? He said. Somewhere safe. Amara. Somewhere safe, she repeated. Pack a bag. The medications, your tablet, the charger, and warm socks. That's the list. Marcus looked at her with the particular expression of a man who knows he's being managed and has decided to allow it, for now. How bad is it? He said. It's handled. That's not what I asked. She met his eyes. Pack the bag, Marcus. He packed the bag. He did it methodically, without rushing, which was how he did most things that required him to move carefully. She watched him and felt the specific guilt of someone who has told a necessary partial truth and knows it and has chosen it anyway and would choose it again. They were in the car within 20 minutes. Dong-hyun held the door. Marcus looked at him, looked at the other man, looked at the car, and said nothing. He got in. He was quiet the entire drive back. When they arrived at the estate, when the iron doors opened inward and the car rolled into the courtyard, and Marcus got his first look at the compound, he said, quietly, to Amara, not to anyone else. You said handled. I said it's being handled. There's a difference. I know, she said. I know there is. Min-jae met them in the entryway. He introduced himself to Marcus with his name only, no other context, which was either tactful or calculated or both. He showed Marcus to a room on the ground floor. No stairs, Amara noted, and felt something complicated about the fact that it had been thought of. Min-jae had thought of it. She didn't say anything about it. Marcus thanked him, formally, with the careful politeness he used with strangers until he'd decided what they were. Min-jae said, If you need anything, the man outside this door will get it for you. And then, unexpectedly, I'm told the building's Wi-Fi covers the whole East Wing. Your room is in the East Wing. Marcus looked at him. Okay. I know this isn't... Minjay stopped, like the sentence had run out of what it needed to finish itself. I know. Marcus looked at him for a moment, then, my sister's shoulder. Who treated it? A physician. She's good. She's going to pretend it doesn't hurt. I know, Minjay said. Make sure she actually rests it. Minjay glanced at Amara, who was looking at the ceiling with the expression of a woman whose brother had just said the most irritating, true thing. I'll do what I can, Minjay said. Marcus nodded. Okay, he said again. And that was the most trust he was extending to this man right now, and they all knew it. The next 36 hours moved in uneven intervals. Minjay's people worked, phones, quiet meetings, in the office room, men coming and going through the side entrance at hours that suggested urgency. Amara wasn't part of those conversations and wasn't invited to be, which she accepted because pushing into the operational core of someone else's war, with her arm in a sling and her brother 2 doors down, would have been a different kind of stupid. Instead, she stayed useful in the ways available to her. She kept Marcus company. She read. She walked the perimeter of the courtyard twice a day because her body needed movement and the wound needed circulation, and also because standing still made her feel like she was waiting to be told what her own life was doing. On the second morning, she found Minjay in the kitchen at 6 a.m. He was making coffee with the focus of a man doing a simple thing badly and aware of it. The machine was complicated, one of those commercial-style things with multiple components, and he was standing in front of it with an expression that would have been funny in a different context. Do you want me to? She started. I have it, he said. She watched him not have it for another 30 seconds. Move, she said. He moved. She made the coffee. It took 4 minutes. He took the cup she handed him and drank from it. Said nothing. She made her own cup and leaned against the counter, and they stood in the kitchen in the early morning quiet of a house full of dangerous men who were all, for this moment, elsewhere. Do-hyun, she said, what kind of man is he? Minjay looked at his cup. The kind who confuses grievance with righteousness. So he thinks he deserves what you took. He thinks he was owed a world that no longer exists. He spent 2 years deciding who to blame for it, and landed on you. I made it easy, Minjay said. I was visible. I was direct. When I dismantled what he'd built, I did it completely, and I didn't hide that it was me. He paused. There's a version of events in which I handled it differently, quietly, given him room to retreat with some dignity. Why didn't you? He looked up at her. Something in his face was older than the rest of him. Because I was younger, and I was tired of watching men like him hide behind quiet. Amara looked at him, thought about that. And now his quiet is shooting at you. Yes. So the lesson didn't take. Something shifted around his mouth. Not a smile, but the near thing. No, not entirely. She drank her coffee. The message came on the 3rd day. It came to her phone, which shouldn't have been possible because she hadn't given her number to anyone new, which meant someone had found it, which meant someone had her number without her knowing they had it, which meant the wall she'd thought was around her was thinner than she'd believed. It was a photo. Her apartment building. Taken from street level, the angle slightly elevated. From a car, she thought, or a low window across the street. The timestamp in the corner read 6:43 a.m., which was 47 minutes ago. Below the photo, one line of text. Your brother's window faces east. She sat very still for 11 seconds. She counted them because counting was what she did when her body wanted to do something she couldn't afford to do. Then she walked directly to Minjay's office and put the phone on his desk with the screen facing up. He looked at it. The change in his face was small and very precise, a kind of stillness that replaced motion, the way a room goes quiet when the temperature drops fast. He picked up one of his phones and spoke Korean in rapid low sentences. Dong-hyun appeared in the doorway within 90 seconds. More Korean. Fast. Dong-hyun left at something that was nearly a run. Minjay put down his phone. He looked at Amara. Marcus isn't at the apartment, she said. He's here. I know. So why does he know which window faces east? Minjay was quiet. He's been there, Amara said. Recently. He's been watching. Yes. He knows we're not there anymore. He's checking, making sure we understand the message. Which is what? She didn't need to ask, but she asked anyway, because saying it out loud was different. That he can find anyone we care about, Minjae said. That distance doesn't protect them. The room was quiet. Amara had been scared since the alley. That was a steady thing, manageable, the kind she'd learned to function alongside because her life had required it before. This was different. This was the shift from I am in danger to Marcus is the danger I'm in. And that shift took something from the floor she'd been standing on. She sat down without deciding to. He's going to keep escalating, she said. Yes. And you can't end this from inside this house. No. So what happens? Minjae looked at the phone still face up on his desk, at the photo of the building where her brother's eastward window waited empty in the morning light. I need to go out to meet it, he said. I've been waiting for intelligence, for the right position. He looked up at her. The intelligence came this morning before your phone. Junseok has a location, 48 hours from now, maybe less. He moves. Then you go to him. Yes. And if it goes wrong, the pause was the longest one yet. Then I've left arrangements, he said, for you and Marcus, money, papers, a contact in Canada who doesn't know my name and doesn't need to. You'd be taken care of. Amara stared at him. The word arrangements hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. You've already written us into your contingency plan, she said. Yes. When? Yesterday. She absorbed that. Yesterday. He'd been thinking about what happened to them if he died yesterday, and today he was still sitting at this desk making decisions and drinking coffee he couldn't make properly, and the gap between those two facts was enormous, and she had no idea what to do with it. You're not going to ask me to thank you for that, she said. No. Good. She stood up. She walked to the door. Amara. She stopped. Same doorway. Different morning. Same use of her name. She turned. You should know, he said. The photo, them sending it to your number, it changes the calculation. They've connected you to me directly now, not as a witness, as a point of leverage. He said it without inflection because softening it would have been a different kind of insult. That means what happens next isn't something you can step away from anymore. She looked at him, at the phones on the desk, at the man who had carried her out of an alley 3 days ago and had her size in the closet, and thought of the East Wing room with no stairs and had written contingency plans for her brother before she'd had a chance to decide if she trusted him. I know, she said. And she did. She'd known it from the second she read the text, the way you know something that changes the shape of everything around it. There was no version of this where she stood outside it anymore. The photo on her phone had made sure of that. Minjae left at noon. He didn't announce it. Amara heard the cars, 2 of them, engines running in the courtyard, and looked out her window and watched him walk out of the main entrance with Dong-hyun beside him, and 4 other men she'd seen but never learned the names of. He moved the way he always moved, with that particular economy that didn't waste anything, not a gesture, not a step. He got in the second car, not the first, which she suspected was deliberate. If someone was watching and waiting for the principal vehicle, they'd hit the wrong one. She watched until both cars were through the iron doors and the doors had closed again. She stood at the window for a moment after that, looking at the empty courtyard, and then she went to find her brother. Marcus was at the desk in his room with his tablet, doing something that involved a spreadsheet and headphones, which meant he was deep in one of the freelance data projects he picked up online. He'd been doing it since the second day here, filling the time the way he always filled uncertain time, with work, because Marcus's version of panic was productivity. She knew it because she did the same thing. He pulled one headphone off when she came in. He left, she said. Marcus looked at her. I heard the cars. Yeah. He waited. She sat on the edge of his bed, which was wider than the one at home, and looked at her hands. You're worried, he said. I'm fine. Amara. I'm worried, she said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, then, what exactly did he go to do? Handle something. You keep using that word like it means something. Marcus, I'm not 16, he said. Not angry, precise. I'm sitting in a man's house I've never met, 2 armed men outside my door, my sister's arm in a sling, and you keep telling me things are being handled like I'm supposed to just do my spreadsheets and not ask. He set the tablet down. Tell me something true. She looked at him, at their mother's eyes in his face, patient and relentless at the same time. Someone tried to kill him, she said. I was in the alley. I got hit instead. The person who ordered it is still out there, and Min Jae went to find the man who carried it out. Marcus absorbed this without flinching. That was the thing people always got wrong about him. They saw the cane and the careful way he moved, and they decided fragile. He wasn't. He'd been processing hard information since he was 13 and learning that his legs would never fully work the way he'd planned. "And us," he said. "We stay here. We're safer here." "Are we?" She thought about the photo, the text. Your brother's window faces east. She told him none of that. She wasn't going to. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a long moment in the way he had, reading what she wasn't saying the way he'd learned to read everything, by watching the edges. "Okay," he said, one word, same weight it always carried. Trust extended one increment at a time. She stayed with him for another hour. She didn't do anything useful. She sat on his bed and listened to him explain what he was working on. Logistics data for a shipping company, nothing interesting, very detailed. And the ordinary sound of it was the closest thing to normal she'd felt in 4 days. The call came at 4:17 p.m. Dong Hyun's number. She picked up immediately. "We have him." His English was careful, measured. "Jun Seok, we have him at the location. Mr. Kong is questioning him now. He wanted you to know." She let out a breath she'd been holding since noon. "He's alive." "Yes, both of them." A pause. "It is going well. He expects to be back by 8. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." She hung up and sat on her bed and let herself feel the relief for 30 seconds, counted them. Then she stood up and went to tell Marcus. What? Min Jae did not come back at 8. At 9 she called Dong Hyun. No answer. At 9:30 she tried again. Same. At 10, one of the men stationed at the house, the one with the brick jaw she'd privately been calling the wall, came to tell her that there had been a delay, that everything was under control, that she should wait. She waited. She was not good at it. At 11:15 the iron doors opened. She heard the car from her room and was in the hallway before she'd decided to move. Dong Hyun came through the main entrance first. Behind him, 2 men she didn't recognize supporting a third between them, and it took her 2 full seconds to process that the third man was Min Jae, that he was walking under his own power but barely, that there was blood on his shirt collar, and his face had the particular gray-white color of someone who had been through something physical and hadn't finished processing it yet. She stopped in the middle of the hallway. He saw her. He said nothing. He kept walking, not toward her, toward the office. Dong Hyun touched her arm as he passed. "He's okay. There was a complication. He'll explain." "What kind of complication?" "He'll explain," Dong Hyun said, and his voice was carrying something she hadn't heard in it before, something that sounded uncomfortably like controlled shock. She gave him 20 minutes. She sat in the hallway outside the office and listened to the low murmur of voices inside and told herself 20 minutes was reasonable, and at 19 minutes she knocked. "Come in," he said. His voice was flat. He was sitting at the desk. Someone had brought him a clean shirt and he'd changed but hadn't buttoned it fully at the collar, and she could see a bandage wrapped tight around his left forearm, white and new. His face had some color back. Not much. The 2 unknown men were gone. Dong Hyun stood against the far wall with his arms at his sides, which was the body language of a man waiting for orders and not sure what they'd be. She sat down across from Min Jae, looked at him, waited. "We got to Jun Seok," he said. "Dong Hyun told me." "He talked." Min Jae looked at the desk, at his hands. "He talked faster than I expected, which should have told me something." She stayed quiet. The phrasing, "should have told me something," had the weight of a thing already understood too late. "Do-hyun didn't hire him," Min Jae said. Amara went still. "Do-hyun is a piece, a visible piece placed deliberately." He looked up at her. His eyes were clear, which was somehow worse than if they weren't. It meant he'd already moved through the shock into whatever came after. "The person behind this is someone I didn't see coming, someone who used Do-hyun as a front because they knew I'd look there first and stop looking." "Who?" she said. The name he said was Lee Seong-wook. It meant nothing to her. But the way Dong Hyun's jaw shifted when he heard it, a small involuntary tightening, told her it meant a great deal to the people in this room. "Who is he?" she said. "He controlled, for 20 years. A significant portion of Seoul's underground financial network, import channels, debt collection, a dozen legitimate fronts. Minji said it without expression. We have history. He wanted to absorb my operation 6 years ago. I refused. He made it unpleasant. I made it more unpleasant back. So another enemy from your past. Not exactly. He stopped. Seong-wook and I have had an arrangement for 3 years. A boundary. His territory, mine. Neither of us crosses it. He looked at the desk again. I thought it was stable. I thought I had evidence that it was stable. Apparently not. Apparently not, he agreed. Quietly. Like the words cost something. Amara looked at him. There's more. He didn't answer immediately. Dong-hyun moved slightly against the wall. Not toward her, just a small shift of weight. Jun-seok told us how Seong-wook knew about the boundary breaking, Min-jae said. How he knew my internal movements, my schedule for that night, the restaurant, the alley. He paused. He had a source inside my organization. The room got very quiet. Someone told him, Amara said. Yes. Someone in your... Yes. She absorbed that. Do you know who? He looked up at her then, and the expression on his face was the most unguarded thing she'd seen from him. Not devastation exactly. He was too controlled for devastation to make it all the way to his face, but something close to it. The look of a man confronting a loss that was personal in a way the others hadn't been. Ryu Seojin, he said, and then, as if it needed context, he has been with me for 9 years. The name meant nothing to her, but she didn't need it to. 9 years. The number was the thing. Where is he now? She said. We don't know, Dong-hyun said from the wall. His voice was careful and controlled, and she could hear the anger underneath it, the way you hear traffic under music. He wasn't at the secondary location when we arrived. Jun-seok told us he'd been warned. Someone warned him that we had Jun-seok. Which means Seong-wook knows, Amara said. Yes. Which means he knows your plan fell apart. Yes. Which means... She stopped. He knows I'm still alive, Min-jae said. He knows I have Jun-seok. And he knows that I now know about the inside source. He said it with the exact flatness of someone reading a list of structural failures after a collapse. Every piece of leverage I thought I had shifted the moment Seojin ran. She sat with that. With the specific shape of it. A man who thought he was hunting, discovering he'd been the one being watched. The arrangements you mentioned, she said, yesterday, for Marcus and me. Still in place. Do they still work if Seong-wook knows about me? The pause. The worst one yet. No, Min-jae said. Seojin knew about those too. She left the office because if she stayed in it, she was going to do something that would not help anyone. She walked to the far end of the hallway, to a window that looked out at nothing. The side wall of the compound, pale stone, a security light throwing orange across the wet surface. And she stood there and breathed. 9 years. A man who'd been inside Min-jae's operation for 9 years had decided at some point, maybe recently, maybe not, to start feeding information to the enemy. And no one had seen it. And now that man was gone, and everything Min-jae had built as a perimeter around Amara and Marcus was revealed to be, in some fundamental structural sense, known. She thought about the photo again. Your brother's window faces east. She'd thought it was surveillance. She'd thought it was Do-hyun's people watching her building. What if it was Seojin's information? What if it had come from inside? That thought sat in her stomach like something swallowed wrong. She heard footsteps behind her, unhurried. She didn't need to turn. I need to know something, she said. Min-jae stopped a few feet behind her. The day you decided Marcus and I should come here, she said. Who knew about that decision before it was made? He was quiet for a moment. Dong-hyun, 2 others, and Seojin. She turned. Seojin knew Marcus was here. Yes. So Seong-wook knows. Almost certainly. And the contingency plan. Seojin had access to the general framework, not the specific contact in Canada, but enough. She looked at him, the bandage on his forearm, the unbuttoned collar, the gray-white that had come back slightly around his eyes. How did he get hurt? She said. Minjae blinked. Excuse me. Your arm, the bandage. How did you get hurt? At the location. When we moved in, there was resistance we hadn't planned for. It's a cut. It's not serious. You're saying it like I'm asking you to rate your own injury on a priority scale. Something moved across his face. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything, she said. I want you to understand that I need you to be thinking clearly. Because the man who was supposed to be thinking clearly for the last 4 days just found out that one of his own people handed us to the enemy, and I need to know that the person making decisions about my brother's safety is not running on... She gestured at his arm, his face, the whole damaged situation, on whatever this is. I'm thinking clearly, he said. Prove it, she said. What's the next move? He looked at her. Something in him settled, not softened, settled, the way a building settles after the initial shock of something seismic, but before the aftershock. I need to get Junseok somewhere secure and out of Seong-wook's reach, he said. I need to find Seojin before Seong-wook can use him again. And I need to rebuild the perimeter around you and Marcus from scratch, with only Dong-hyun and one other man who weren't connected to Seojin's access. That's 3 things. Yes. Which one is first? Seojin, he said, without hesitation. If Seong-wook gets to him first and he disappears, we lose the evidence chain. Seojin is the thread that connects Seong-wook to the assassination order. Without him, we have Junseok's word, which is the word of a contract killer. Courts don't hold that. You're talking about courts, she said. I'm talking about ending this permanently, he said, not just surviving it. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay. Okay. What do you need from me? He seemed briefly to not have expected that question. Nothing, he said. Stay with your brother. Let us... What do you need from me? She repeated. Same cadence, different weight. He looked at her the way he had in the alley, that assessment that was not quite compassion and not quite cold. There's something Jun Seok said about how the message was delivered to your phone, the number they used to send the photo. What about it? It's a relay number. It bounced through 3 servers, but Jun Seok gave us the origin. The origin traces to a location Seong-wook uses as a legitimate business front, an import company in Mapo. He paused. The reason I can't just move on it directly is that Seong-wook has a man inside the Mapo police precinct. Any official inquiry triggers a warning to him. So you can't go through official channels. Not yet. But the import company has a public business registry, which means its filing records are accessible to anyone with a registered Korean business ID. He stopped. And I have one, she said. He blinked. Excuse me. My delivery service. I registered it 18 months ago because the app required Korean business registration for top-tier accounts. She watched his expression. You didn't know that. No, he said. I didn't. She almost smiled. It came out more like a grimace, but it was close. So for once, something I did for a reason that had nothing to do with you is actually useful. He looked at her. You don't have to... If I access the business registry and pull Seong-wook's import company filings, what are you looking for? A director name that doesn't match the public registration. Seong-wook uses proxies, but he always maintains a back channel to direct oversight. There'll be a name buried in the subsidiary filings, a name that connects to him directly. With that name, I have something a court will hold. And if Seong-wook finds out I ran that search, the pause was shorter this time. He'll know someone is looking at his front company. Will he know it was me? Not if you access through the public portal with a clean business ID. She nodded, once, decided. Give me a laptop, she said. Something that's not connected to your network. It took her 40 minutes and 3 wrong filing branches before she found it. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the laptop open, Dong-hyun standing near the doorway doing the opposite of hovering, making himself geometrically unobtrusive while remaining present. Min-jae sat across from her, not watching the screen, watching her face, which she found both more and less unnerving than the alternative. The import company was called Donghae Inbound Solutions. Established 8 years ago, publicly registered in Mapo, 3 listed directors, clean trade filings. She went into the subsidiary chain, a holding company in Incheon, registered 2 years after the parent. The holding company had 1 director listed under the secondary authorization clause. The kind of filing most people never looked at because it was buried under language designed to be ignored. The name was O.J. Young. She wrote it down on the corner of a notepad. She turned the notepad to face Min Jae. He looked at the name. Something crossed his face. Recognition, and with it, something that was almost relief. And underneath that, something much harder. "You know him," she said. "O.J. Young is Seong Wook's brother-in-law," Min Jae said quietly. "He's been listed as a legal consultant for a dozen shell entities. He doesn't appear on anything publicly connected to Seong Wook's main operations. But this connects them. If I can show O.J. Young as the authorizing director on the same relay server that sent the threat to your phone, yes, it connects Seong Wook to the assassination order through a traceable legal document." He looked up. "This is what I've needed." She looked at the name on the notepad, at how ordinary it was. 4 syllables, 2 words. The kind of thing that could appear on 1,000 business filings. "So now what?" she said. Minji picked up one of his phones, stopped, looked at her. His phone rang. Not the one in his hand, one of the phones on the table. The sound was different from the others. A lower tone. A number she could see from where she sat was not labeled with a name. He looked at the screen. Every visible muscle in his face stopped moving. He picked it up, put it to his ear, said nothing. A voice came through. She couldn't make out words, only the timbre of it, low and unhurried. The voice of someone who had all the time in the world, because time had already been arranged in their favor. Min Jae listened for 40 seconds. He said 3 words in Korean that she couldn't parse. He hung up. He set the phone down with the precise deliberateness of a man managing his own hands. "Who was that?" she said. He looked at her. His face had done the thing again. The thing from the office. That unguarded fraction of a second before everything was controlled again. But this time it lasted longer. "Seong Wook," he said. She waited. "He has Seo Jin." Min Jae's voice was level and empty in the way of something scoured. "He's offering an exchange." "For what?" He looked at the notepad, at the name she'd found, at 40 minutes of work that had just become the fulcrum. "For the filing," he said. "He knows I found it. He doesn't know how, but he knows." He paused. "He wants the filing suppressed. He wants Jun Seok released. And he wants—" He stopped. "He wants what?" "He wants you," Min Jae said. "Specifically, by name." He said it without inflection, but his jaw was tight with the effort of that. "He says you're the witness who identified Jun Seok's mark. He says as long as you're alive and connected to me, you're a liability he can't manage." The kitchen was completely silent. Amara looked at the notepad, at the 4 syllables that had apparently been seen somehow, traced somehow, from a clean business ID in a public portal in 40 minutes. "He's been watching the portal," she said. "Almost certainly. He knew I'd find it. Or he knew someone would. He set a flag." Min Jae's voice was careful, precise, the voice of a man walking a very narrow surface. The moment that subsidiary filing was accessed, he knew. "And he called you immediately. Within minutes of you writing that name down." She looked at the name on the notepad, at how it had gone from a solution to a trap in the space of a phone call. "He's not going to stop," she said. "No. Even if you give him everything he wants." The pause was very short. "No, he won't." She looked up. "Because I've seen the tattoo." "Yes." "And I know about the filing." "Yes." "So there's no version of this where I hand something over and walk away." "No," he said. And the steadiness with which he said it, the refusal to dress it up, was, she understood suddenly, the most honest thing anyone had said to her since the alley. She sat back in the chair. She looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she looked at Min Jae. "Then the exchange is a trap," she said. "He doesn't want to trade. He wants to know your position." "Yes." "And Seojin." "Seojin is already a liability to him, whether he trades him or not." She understood that too. Seojin had served his purpose. He was evidence now. "So you can't trade," she said. "And you can't wait. And Seong Wook knows everything Seojin knew, which means he knows this building, he knows Marcus is here, and he knows—" Her phone buzzed on the table between them. They both looked at it. A photo. Marcus's room. The East Wing room with no stairs that Minji had thought to arrange. The room where Marcus had his tablet and his headphones and was doing his spreadsheet and trusting her when she said things were being handled. In the photo, Marcus was sitting at his desk with his back to the camera. The camera was inside the room. Amara was on her feet before she knew she was standing, already moving toward the door, and Min Jae was faster, past her, into the hallway, his voice cutting hard in Korean. And then they were both running, and the sound of her own pulse was very loud, and the 19 steps between the kitchen and the east wing door had never in her life felt so long. The door to Marcus's room was open. That was the first wrong thing. It had been closed when Amara walked past it 20 minutes ago. She was certain of that. She'd noted it the way she noted everything now, cataloging details the way her body had learned to do since the alley. And the door had been closed, and now it was open, and Min Jae was already through it ahead of her with his hand at his side, where she'd never seen him keep it before. Marcus was at his desk. He was sitting exactly as he appeared in the photo. Back straight, headphones around his neck now, tablet closed in front of him. He was alive. He turned when they came through the door, and his expression shifted through three things in quick succession: surprise, assessment, and then a kind of controlled stillness that Amara recognized as his version of not showing fear. "There was someone in here," he said. Not a question. Min Jae was already moving through the room. Closet, bathroom, behind the door, the window. The window latch was unlocked. He'd locked it himself 2 days ago. Amara had watched him do it. "I heard something," Marcus said. 10 minutes ago. I thought it was the heat clicking. Then I thought—" He stopped. The tablet camera light came on by itself, just for a second. I figured it was a software thing. It wasn't a software thing. Min Jae said something into his phone in Korean. Fast, clipped. The tone of instructions that don't wait for acknowledgement. He came back to the center of the room and looked at Marcus directly. "Can you walk?" he said. "Right now. How far?" Marcus looked at him. "Depends on where." "The east stairwell, 3 flights down to the basement level. There's a secondary exit." "I can do 3 flights. It won't be slow." "I said I can do it." Min Jae looked at Amara. She was already at Marcus's bag, pulling it open, checking medications, charger, tablet. She zipped it and put it over her own good shoulder and looked up. "Now," she said. They moved. Dong-hyun materialized at the hallway junction like he'd been placed there by calculation, which he probably had. He fell in beside Min Jae without a word exchanged. The wall, the man with the brick jaw, was ahead of them, moving backward down the corridor, watching behind them, which meant he was watching where they'd come from, which meant the threat could come from behind. Amara kept her hand on Marcus's arm. Not pulling, pressure, the kind that says, "I'm here, keep pace." She could feel the effort in him, the measured way he placed each step, cane in his right hand, and she matched her rhythm to his, and did not once look back to check on him because looking back would have told him to be afraid. The stairwell was cold, emergency lighting, low and orange, and the sound of their feet on concrete was too loud. 3 flights. Marcus took them without complaint and without asking anyone to slow down, which meant it was costing him, which meant she'd deal with that later, when later existed. The basement was storage, crates, mechanical equipment, the smell of oil and sealed concrete. A door at the far end had a keypad, and Dong-hyun punched a code without hesitating, and it opened to a narrow corridor and then a ramp, and then a second door that opened to the outside. Outside was an alley that ran behind the compound's east wall. A car was already there, engine running. Different car. She hadn't seen this one before. "Get in," Min Jae said. "Where are we going?" Amara said. "Safe house. Different district. Nothing Seo-jin knew about." "Are you sure about that?" The look he gave her was the look of a man who understood the question and didn't resent it. "Yes. This location was established 6 months ago through a channel Seo-jin wasn't part of. I kept it separate deliberately. I wasn't sure why at the time." "Instinct," she said. "Yes." She got in. Marcus got in beside her. Dong-hyun took the front. The wall stayed at the door they'd come through. Min Jae got in last, and the car moved before the door was fully closed. The safe house was a 4th-floor apartment in Seodamun. Ordinary building, ordinary street, the kind of place where nobody looked up when a car stopped because cars stopped there constantly. They went up in a service elevator that smelled like detergent and took them to a gray hallway and a door with 2 locks. Inside was functional. Couch, table, 2 bedrooms, A kitchen stocked with the kind of non-perishable ordinariness that meant someone had thought ahead without knowing for what. Marcus sat on the couch immediately, and she could see from the line of his jaw that his legs were done. 3 flights at that pace had cost him, and he was running the damage assessment behind his eyes the way she'd watched him do for 11 years. She sat beside him, not asking, present. He said quietly, "I'm fine." "I know." "The legs are just, I know, Marcus." He nodded, put his hand over hers briefly. 1 second. Then he straightened and looked at the room and started doing what he always did, orienting, mapping, figuring out where the exits were. She loved him so much it sometimes felt like a structural problem. Min-jae sat up at the table with Dong-hyun. She could hear them through the open kitchen pass-through, low, deliberate, occasional silences that meant decisions being made. She got Marcus water and left him with the tablet and went to stand in the kitchen doorway. "Talk to me," she said. Min-jae looked up. "We have until morning. Seong-wook knows the estate has been compromised from his end, but he doesn't know we've moved yet. He'll know by morning." "What happens at morning?" "He'll move. He's been patient because patience was working. It's not working anymore." He looked at the table. At a map of Seoul he'd pulled up on his own tablet, several locations circled in red. "He'll want to consolidate everything that connects him to the assassination order before I can use any of it. That means Jun Seok becomes a liability. That means Seojin becomes a liability. He'll kill them both." "Yes." And then he has a clean line. No witness, no inside source, no filing trail that can be authenticated without the living chain. "But we have the filing. We have a screenshot and a notepad with a name." His voice was even. "A good lawyer dissolves that in 40 minutes. She looked at him. "So you need the living chain." "I need Seong-wook to make a provable move, something that can't be cleaned afterward." "How do you make him do that?" The pause was a specific kind, not uncertainty, but the beat before something is said that can't be unsaid. "He called me," Min-jae said. "He offered an exchange. I told him I needed time to consider." "You told him?" She stopped. "He thinks you're considering it. He thinks I'm afraid for you and your brother. He thinks I'll trade to protect you." Min-jae met her eyes. "He's not entirely wrong about what I want. He's wrong about what I'll do." The kitchen was very quiet. "You want to let him think the trade is happening," she said. "Yes." "And when he comes to make it, you have something in place." "Yes, but I need to come personally. Or to send Seojin as an intermediary, which he will, because Seojin is his proof that he has inside access, and he'll want to display that." Min-jae's jaw tightened. "If Seojin is present at a documented exchange attempt, I have him on conspiracy, and through him, Seong-wook. Who documents it?" "I have a contact," he said. "An investigator, not police. Someone who operates in the space between official and unofficial and has enough personal history with Seong-wook's network to want the evidence as badly as I do." "Can you trust them?" "At this point," he said, "I trust them more than I trust most of the people I've trusted for years." He said it without bitterness. Just fact, delivered cleanly. She looked at the circled locations on his map. "Where?" "Industrial complex. Yongsan district." He knows it. It's a location his organization has used as neutral ground before. He'll accept it because it feels like his territory. "And the trap?" "Is already there." He paused. "My investigator moved into position 2 hours ago, before the phone call, before any of tonight." He looked at her. "I've been building towards Seong-wook for months. Tonight is the first time I've had a provable connection. I just need him to walk toward it." She stared at him. "You've been working toward him for months." "Yes." "And you didn't know Seojin was feeding him information?" "No." "But you kept the investigator, the Yongsan location, separate from everything Seojin had access to?" "Yes." She absorbed that. The architecture of it. A man who compartmentalized his trust the way a ship is built with sealed compartments, so that when one floods, the others hold. He'd been doing it for months. Maybe longer. "You're not as surprised by Seojin as you looked," she said. Something crossed his face. "I was surprised by the timing, not entirely by the fact." He stopped. "I suspected there was a leak. I didn't know where, so I built the most critical pieces where nothing leaked to." "You let him think he had full access?" "Yes." To draw out whoever it was. Yes. She should have been angry at that. The calculation of it. Instead, she felt something more complicated. The recognition of a man who had been playing a longer game than she could see, at a cost she was only beginning to understand. Does the exchange proposal still work, she said, now that he knows about the filing? It works better, Min-jae said. Now he has urgency. He needs the filing suppressed before it goes anywhere. He'll move faster, which means he'll be less careful. When? I'll tell him dawn. He'll want to meet before the city wakes up. Less exposure. That's 5 hours. Yes. She looked at the map. At Yongsan. At the circled building that she could see from the shape of the mark was large. Some kind of complex, multiple structures. I'm going, she said. Both men looked at her. No, Min-jae said. I'm the reason he's calling it an exchange. He wants me. If I'm not present, he'll know something is wrong. You being present is not, you said he wants me specifically. By name, you said I'm the liability he can't manage. She held his gaze. If the exchange requires me to be believably offered, I need to be there. Otherwise, the moment he sees the setup, he runs, and you have nothing. It's too dangerous. Min-jae. First time she'd used his name, she watched it register. I was a food delivery driver in an alley 6 days ago. I've been shot. I've been photographed in my own building. Someone was in my brother's room 20 minutes ago. The danger has been here the whole time. At least this way I'm pointing it somewhere. He looked at her. She could see him working through it. Not the logic, he'd already run the logic, but something else. Something that had to do with the fact that he'd written contingency plans for her and her brother, that he'd thought of the East Wing room with no stairs, that he'd asked Dong-hyun to watch her building while she slept. You stay in the car, he said, visible from the meeting point. That's all he needs. Confirmation you're there. The moment he commits to the approach, you're pulled back. Fine. I mean it. I said fine. He looked at her for 3 more seconds. Then he looked at Dong-hyun. Something passed between them. An entire conversation in a glance. The shorthand of men who've worked together long enough to think in the same patterns. Dong-hyun pulled out his phone and started making calls. She told Marcus at 2 a.m. Not everything. Enough. She sat on the edge of his bed. He'd been lying down, not sleeping. She could tell from the way his eyes came to her immediately. And she told him that she had to go somewhere at dawn, that Dong-hyun would be here, that it would be over by morning. You're going with him, Marcus said. Yes. To do something that ends this. Yes. He looked at the ceiling. Is it going to work? I think so. You think? Marcus, I know. He closed his eyes for a moment, opened them. Come back. That's the plan. I'm not making a request. I'm giving you an instruction. He looked at her. Come back. She put her hand on his arm, kept it there. Okay, she said. She sat with him until his breathing slowed. She wasn't sure if he slept. She didn't sleep. She sat in the dark of a room in a city that had taken a very strange turn with her life. And she thought about nothing useful, and at 3:45 a.m. she got up and washed her face and went to find Min-jae. I was at the table, alone. Dong-hyun had stepped out. The tablet was closed. He had a cup of cold coffee he hadn't been drinking, and he looked up when she came in with the expression of a man who hadn't slept either and wasn't pretending otherwise. She sat across from him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. When this is over, she said. What do you do? He looked at the cup. I've thought about that. And? And I'm not sure the answer I would have given a week ago is still the right one. He said it like a man turning something over in his hands, examining it. I've spent a long time building something that required me to be a specific kind of person. I'm not certain that person is the only version of me that's possible. She looked at him. That's the most you've said about yourself that isn't operational. Something moved around his mouth. Is that a problem? No, she said. It's just, I noticed. They sat in the quiet apartment at 3:45 in the morning while Seoul moved through its dark hours outside, and the people in it slept through the particular drama of this one night. And Amara thought about the alley, and the cold pavement, and the man who had asked who shot you in a voice like a closed fist. And she thought about the East Wing room and the notepad with the 4 syllables that had blown everything open. and she thought about Marcus saying come back like it was an instruction and not a prayer. At 4:30, Min Jae's phone buzzed. He read the screen. Seong-wook confirmed, he said. Dawn, Yongsun. She nodded. Amara. His voice had changed. Not softer, cleaner, like he'd made a decision about something and the decision had settled him. Whatever happens tonight, you and Marcus, that's already arranged, separately from everything Seo-jin knew. It holds regardless. I know, she said. You told me. I'm telling you again. She looked at him, at the bandage on his arm, at the lines around his eyes that were not soft lines but had, in the last 6 days, become familiar to her in the specific way that things become familiar when you have no choice but to pay attention. Don't do, she said. Do what? Say things to me like it might be the last chance. She said it without heat. Go into this expecting to come back. That's what I need from you. He looked at her for a long moment, then, okay, she said. At 5, they left the apartment. The elevator smelled like detergent. The street was pre-dawn gray, the specific colorless hour before the city remembered what it looked like. The car was waiting. She got in. Minji got in beside her, not in the second car this time, in this one, next to her. And she didn't say anything about that, and neither did he. They drove toward Yongsan in the dark, and the silence and the particular specific density of something about to happen that cannot be stopped and can only be moved through. The industrial complex was 3 interconnected buildings behind a fence line. Legitimate import business, closed this time of day, the signage visible as the car slowed. Donghae Inbound Solutions, which she recognized, which meant the location itself was Seong-wook's, which meant he'd chosen his own ground and thought it made him safer. Min Jae's investigator had been here since midnight. Min Jae had told her that. She hadn't seen the investigator and didn't expect to go out. The point was presence without visibility. Donghyun parked the car at the edge of the approach road, 200 meters from the main gate, far enough for cover, close enough to be seen from the gate if someone was looking for the car. Minji got out. He did not look back at her. He walked toward the gate with 2 men she didn't know on either side of him, and his stride was what it always was. Controlled, purposeful, the walk of a man who had never once in his adult life let anyone see him hesitate. She watched him through the windshield. Donghyun was in the front seat. He'd been quiet since they left the apartment. He'll be okay, she said, to herself as much as to him. He's very good at this, Donghyun said. He has been for a long time. I know. At 5:38 a.m., 2 vehicles came from the opposite direction and stopped at the main gate. She counted 4 men out of the first vehicle, 2 from the second. Then a third figure, slight, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone managing their own anxiety, who she didn't recognize but whose posture said everything. Seo-jin. It had to be. Then the door of the second vehicle opened again and a man got out who did not need to announce himself. The way he moved, unhurried, expansive, the walk of someone who had never in their life needed to consider whether they were welcome, said everything before she could see his face clearly. Lee Seong-wook. He'd come personally. Min Jae had been right about the urgency. The filing had made him careless. He'd come personally. She reached for the door handle without deciding to, and Donghyun's hand came over the seat and closed around her wrist. Not hard, just present. Not yet, he said. She watched through the windshield. Min Jae and Seong-wook were 40 meters apart now. She couldn't hear anything. She could read posture. Min Jae still, Seong-wook gesturing, Seo-jin close behind Seong-wook, and not looking at Min Jae, which told her he couldn't, that guilt or fear or both were keeping his eyes on the ground. Then Seong-wook raised his hand. Not a gesture, a signal. From the roof of the far building, a shape resolved from the dark. A figure, prone, something long, and supported in front of them. A shooter. A second shooter, not Jun Seok, someone new. And the line from that rooftop ran not to Minji but to the car, to the windshield, to where she was sitting. Donghyun was already moving. Get down, get down. And she was already dropping below the dash when the window above her head starred and the sound of the shot arrived a half-second later like an afterthought, and the car's engine was running, Donghyun's foot on the accelerator and the car lurching sideways behind the concrete barrier at the roadside. And she was on the floor of the back seat with her arms screaming from where she'd caught her shoulder in the fall, and her heart was very loud and very close, and she heard herself breathing in the specific way she'd heard herself breathing in the alley 7 nights ago. Fast, functional, not yet panic, not yet. She made herself count. 1, 2, 3. On 4, gunfire. Not from the rooftop, from multiple directions. A different sound, organized, the pattern of people who had planned where to be. Min-jae's investigator, moving. She raised her head enough to see through the starred window. The 2 vehicles at the gate were blocked. Another car had come in fast from the side road and sat sideways across the exit. Men in dark gear moving with the precision of people who did this professionally. Not Min-jae's usual people. Different. Official in a way that Min-jae's organization was not. The investigator, who operated in the space between official and unofficial. She'd brought both. Seong-wook was shouting. She could see it from the movement of his body. Seo-jin had dropped to the ground. Min-jae had moved left, behind cover, and she couldn't see him clearly anymore. The rooftop shooter. She looked, found the position. The figure was gone. Either the investigators' people had him, or he'd run. Either way, the line to her windshield was broken. Dong-hyun said from the front, "Stay down, 2 more minutes." "Is Min-jae—" "Stay down." She stayed down. The 2 minutes were the longest she'd spent since the alley. She lay on the floor of the back seat with the sound of controlled chaos outside and her shoulder burning, and her brother 15 kilometers away in a safe house being watched by people she'd had to choose to trust. And she thought, this is the cost. Not the bullet in the alley, not the photo on her phone, or the unlocked window in Marcus's room. This, lying on the floor of a car, waiting to find out if the thing you've walked into is going to close around you or open up. This is what it costs to be standing where you're standing. She heard a door, footsteps. Then Min-jae's voice, outside, sharp and near. Then the car door opened and he was crouching beside her, and she looked up at him from the floor of the back seat, and he looked at her face with that expression that was not quite compassion and not quite relief, and was all the more real for being neither. "Are you hurt?" he said. "My shoulder, the fall." "I'm fine." She sat up. "Seong-wook." Contained. His voice was tight. "The investigators' team has him." Seo-jin surrendered. He looked at her shoulder, then at her face. "The second shooter is in custody." "The evidence." "The approach." "The signal he gave." "The second shooter's presence." He paused. "My investigator had it all documented from the moment Seong-wook arrived. Everything from the confirmed conspiracy call to a documented attempt on a civilian witness." "Me," she said. "I'm the civilian witness." "Yes." She looked at him, sitting on the floor of a car with a blown-out window in the pre-dawn gray of a Yongsan Industrial Access Road, her shoulder on fire, the sound of Seong-wook's empire coming apart 40 meters away in the cold morning air. "It worked," she said. "Yes. You were right about the urgency." "I'm right occasionally," he said. And the flatness of it was so unexpected that she almost laughed. And this time she did, briefly, and it pulled her shoulder and she pressed her hand against it and breathed through it, and Min-jae watched her do this with an expression she was going to spend a long time thinking about later. "I need to call Marcus," she said. "Yes." She held out her hand. He put his phone in it without hesitating. She dialed. It rang twice. Marcus picked up. She said, "Eggs." A pause. Then his voice, rough with the kind of relief that comes out sounding like irritation. "It took you long enough." I know, she said. "I know." Outside, the sky had begun its slow gray shift toward morning, and somewhere in the tangle of vehicles and people and the last machinery of a collapsed empire, the city was beginning to wake up, indifferent and enormous, and entirely unaware of what had just been decided inside it in the dark. The sun came up the way it always did over Seoul, indifferent, incremental, the light arriving not as revelation but as slow insistence, filling the gaps between buildings and pushing the dark back into corners where it waited for evening. Amara sat in the back seat of the car with Min-jae's phone still warm in her hand and listened to her brother's breathing on the other end of the line settle into something that sounded like a man putting a weight down after carrying it for hours. She didn't say much after the eggs, neither did Marcus. They stayed on the line for 2 minutes, doing nothing in particular, and that nothing was the most useful conversation she'd had in a week. When she hung up, she looked at Min-jae's phone for a moment. His lock screen was blank. No photo, No personalization, just a dark rectangle. She handed it back. Outside, Seong-wook's two vehicles were still crossways at the gate. The investigators' people. And she could see now that there were more of them than she'd registered in the dark, 7, maybe 8, in gear that was official enough to matter and unofficial enough to move fast, were managing the scene with the efficiency of people who had waited a long time to do exactly this. Seong-wook himself was in the back of a vehicle she didn't recognize, and she couldn't see his face from here, but she could see the shape of him through the glass. The expansive posture reduced now, compressed. A man who had spent decades taking up space, discovering what it felt like when the space was taken back. Seojin was sitting on the ground near the fence. Not restrained, he'd surrendered, Min-jae had said. And surrendering in that context apparently meant sitting on the ground with your hands visible and your head at an angle that had nothing to do with patience and everything to do with a man trying to calculate what came next when next was very small. She looked at him. She'd never seen him before. He was Min-jae's age, or close, early 40s, medium height, with the kind of unremarkable face that made 9 years of proximity to a man like Min-jae make a specific terrible sense. Unremarkable was useful. Unremarkable slipped in and out of rooms. Unremarkable answered phones and filed access codes and passed information sideways for however long it took for whatever arrangement he'd made with Seong-wook to feel worth what it was costing. She looked away. "What happens to him?" she said. Min-jae was outside the car, standing with the door open, one arm resting on the roof. He glanced at Seojin. His face did nothing for a moment. "That's not mine to decide anymore," he said. "First time you've said something like that." "Yes." He looked at her. "It feels different than I expected." She understood that he was not talking only about Seojin. The investigator's name was Park Yuna. She was 53, which Amara registered because she'd expected someone younger. The word investigator had assembled a particular image. And because Park Yuna carried her age the way people carry something they've earned, not something they're managing. She wore a gray jacket over dark clothes, and she walked with the efficiency of someone who had never in her life had the luxury of an unnecessary gesture. She came to the car. She looked at Amara first, then at Min-jae. 7 years, she said to him in English, presumably for Amara's benefit. "I've been building toward this for 7 years, and you hand me the last piece in 6 days. Something in her expression was drier than dry. "Through a food delivery driver." "She found O.J. Young's name," Min-jae said. "I didn't." Park Yuna looked at Amara. "The subsidiary filing." "It was there," Amara said. "Anyone could have found it." "Anyone didn't." She held Amara's gaze for a moment with the directness of someone who didn't waste eye contact. "You're the witness who identified Jun Seok's mark." "Yes." "I'll need a formal statement. Not today. When the shoulder is better. When you've slept." She said the last 2 words like she was reading a list of structural requirements. "It will matter for the prosecution. You understand that?" "I understand." "It puts you on record." "I know what it does," Amara said. Park Yuna looked at her for another moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, "Good." She turned back to Min-jae. "Seong-wook will have lawyers by noon. The charges need to be airtight within 48 hours or the first layer dissolves. The filing and the approach documentation, combined with the second shooter's weapon tracing back to a Seong-wook proxy purchase 18 months ago. Yes. It holds. Barely." She paused. "Jun Seok's testimony will need to be formalized. He'll negotiate. His lawyer will negotiate harder. He'll want immunity. Partial. I won't give full." Her voice was the voice of a woman who had spent 7 years wanting exactly what she was getting and had no intention of making it cheap. "He gives us the full chain. Every order, every payment, every intermediary between himself and Seong-wook going back to the beginning. Partial immunity for full cooperation. That's the offer." Min-jae was quiet for a moment. "And Do-hyun?" "Park Do-hyun has already been detained. He's been talking since 4 a.m. He's been wanting to talk, actually. He's been terrified that Seong-wook would clean him up as soon as the operation collapsed." Park Yuna said it without satisfaction. "He's the one who gave us the second shooter's name, so he's useful. He ordered Jun Seok's original engagement. Yes, he'll serve time. Less than he deserves, more than his lawyer will want. That's what the evidence supports." She picked up the tablet she'd been carrying under her arm and pulled up something, turned it toward Min-jae. This is what I need from you. A signed affidavit of the events from the alley forward. Your perspective. Specifically the call Seong-wook made to your phone. The exchange proposal. With that on record, the conspiracy charge goes from strong to airtight. Min-jae looked at the tablet. He took it. Park Yuna turned to go. Stopped. One more thing, she said. Ryu Seo-jin. She said the name the way you say a thing you've had in your mouth too long. I wasn't working for Seong-wook out of ideology or loyalty. He was in debt. Significant personal debt, the kind that accumulates when someone makes choices they don't tell anyone about. Seong-wook found it and used it. She paused. That doesn't change what he did, but it's the reason. I thought you should know the reason. She looked at Min-jae steadily. He looked back. I know, he said. I suspected something similar. And you didn't act on the suspicion. I didn't have proof. I don't move on suspicion. No, Park Yuna said. You don't. That's why this took as long as it did, and also why it'll hold. She walked toward the gate. Min-jae watched her go. His face was doing the thing it did when it was perfectly still. Not the absence of expression, but the presence of everything held in check. Amara got out of the car. Her legs were stiff. The shoulder pulled when she moved, and she breathed through it and stood on the Yongsan access road in the early morning cold and looked at the lightening sky. She's been doing this for 7 years, Amara said, going after Seong-wook. Her daughter, Min-jae said, 8 years ago. A man connected to Seong-wook's debt collection network. He stopped. She was 17. Amara was quiet. Yuna became a private investigator after. She had the skill from before. She was law enforcement for 15 years. She chose to leave so she could move in ways that official work didn't permit. He looked toward the gate. She's been building a case that official channels would accept, that required doing things official channels couldn't do to gather the evidence, and then presenting it cleanly enough that they had to take it. 7 years, Amara said again. Yes. And she needed you. She needed what I had access to, and I needed the documentation that would hold in a court. Neither of us could finish it alone. He paused. We've known each other for 3 years. She came to me. She laid out what she had and what she needed. I've been feeding her documented evidence when I had it. That's what you meant, Amara said, when you said ending it permanently, not just surviving. Yes. She looked at him, at the man who had been building a structure in parallel to everything she'd watched him do this week. The guards, the contingency plans, the compartmentalization, the careful rationing of information, all of it feeding toward this. A prosecution that would hold. You could have just killed him, she said, flatly. No accusation. Yes, he said. I could have. Why didn't you? He looked at the gate, at Seong-wook's compressed shape in the vehicle beyond it. Because dead men don't answer for anything, he said. They become grievances. They become reasons. Every man I've ended, there is someone who uses that ending as a foundation for something worse. He turned to look at her. Seong-wook in prison. Charged. Documented. Public. That's different. That means it happened. It means it's real and recorded, and it doesn't disappear into someone's version of events. You want accountability. I want there to be a record, he said. That's all. Just a record. She understood that this was not a small thing for a man who had spent his life in the space between law and its absence. She understood that it was, in some way, she was only beginning to see the shape of everything. They returned to the safe house at 7:15. Marcus was awake. He was at the table with his tablet and a cup of instant coffee that the kitchen had provided, and he looked up when they came in with the specific expression he'd worn since he was 16 when he was monitoring a situation and had decided not to let on how closely. He looked at Amara, at her shoulder, at her face. Done, she said. Done, he repeated. Not a question. Yeah. He looked at Min-jae. A long look, the kind Marcus gave people he was reassigning from the category of unknown quantity to something more specific. Min-jae met it without flinching, which Amara noted. Sit down, Marcus said to her. You look like you've been run over. I feel like it. Then sit. She sat. Min-jae sat across the table. Dong-hyun, who had been running on the same no-sleep timeline as everyone else, went to make coffee with the kind of focused intent of a man converting exhaustion into task completion. Marcus looked between them. So what happens now? Min-jae folded his hands on the table, looked at them. Seong-wook is in custody. The charges are documented. The prosecutor's office will take possession of the case by tomorrow. He paused. You and your sister will need to give formal statements. I've spoken with the investigator about a protected witness process that keeps your names out of the public record. Your statement goes to the court. It doesn't go to the press. And after the statement. After the statement, you're free, completely. No obligation, no continued involvement. He paused again, and this one had more inside it. I've already transferred funds to an account in your sister's name. Don't argue, he said preemptively, looking at Amara. It's not a payment. It's what should have been there from the moment she was shot in an alley because of something that had nothing to do with her. It's a correction. Amara opened her mouth, closed it. The number when Dong-hyun had shown it to her in the car had been large enough to rewrite several years of hard mathematics. I'll argue later, she said, when I have more energy. Fine. Marcus looked at Min-jae with the expression of a man who had made a preliminary decision about someone and was running a final check. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I didn't have a clear picture. I worked from what Amara wasn't saying. He picked up his coffee cup. She wasn't scared of you. That told me something. What did it tell you? That you weren't the kind of dangerous that operates on fear of the person next to you. He looked at his cup. That's a specific kind. The worst kind. You're not that. Min-jae said nothing. He looked at the table for a moment. Thank you, he said. It came out with some effort, which Amara thought was probably what made it real. Marcus shrugged. Don't make it weird. He picked up his tablet. I'm going to finish my spreadsheet. Amara slept for 11 hours. She didn't mean to. She lay down on the couch in the safe house apartment, intending to rest her shoulder for an hour. And when she opened her eyes again, the light had changed completely, and the apartment was quiet, and someone had put a blanket over her that hadn't been there when she closed her eyes. She lay still for a moment and took inventory. Shoulder, substantial, manageable. The rest of her, the specific flatness that comes after adrenaline, has finished processing and left the body to account for itself. She felt old in a temporary way, like a machine that had been run past its recommended cycle and needed time before it worked smoothly again. She sat up. The blanket fell. Minju was at the table. He had a laptop open that she hadn't seen before, and he was reading something that required scrolling slowly, and he looked up when she moved with the alertness of someone who had not been asleep. What time? She said. 7. She'd slept from 8 in the morning to 7 in the evening. Where's Marcus? His room. He's been working. He ate. Dong-hyun went out for food at 2. He paused. You slept through a considerable amount of activity. Is any of it bad? No. Park Yuna called. The charges were formally filed at 4 p.m. Seong-wook was arraigned at 6. His lawyers are already doing what lawyers do. But the evidence held, which means the arraignment held, which means the next step is trial. He closed the laptop partway. Jun Seok accepted the partial immunity agreement. He spoke for 3 hours this afternoon. By the time he finished, there were 11 additional charges filed. She absorbed that. 11 more. Seojin, she said. Min-jae looked at the table. He's cooperating fully. His lawyer negotiated. They always do. He'll serve time. A pause. Less than I would have chosen. More than he thinks he deserves, probably. That's how these things go. Does it? She stopped. Tried again. Does it feel like enough? He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. But I think feeling like enough is not the standard. The standard is that it's done, properly done. And it is. He looked up at her. That's what I keep coming back to. Not that it feels like enough, just that it's done. She nodded. Are you hungry? He said. Yes. Dong-hyun brought back more than anyone could eat. It's in the kitchen. She went to the kitchen. She ate standing over the counter because her body wanted food faster than the table required. Dong-hyun had brought kimbap, 2 kinds of soup, and a bag of tangerines that she appreciated with an intensity that surprised her. She peeled one and ate it segment by segment and felt the citrus hit the back of her throat and thought, I am alive. I am eating a tangerine. These are both unremarkable and not. Minjae appeared in the kitchen doorway. He leaned against the frame. You can go home, he said. Tomorrow, if you want. The apartment has been cleared and swept. The surveillance that Seong-wook's people had on the building has been removed. He paused. You don't have to stay here. I know, she said. I want you to know you have the choice. She peeled another segment. Where are you going? There are things that need to be. I have operations to unwind. Legitimate ones to consolidate. The illegal arms of what I've built need to be transferred or closed. He said it like a man reading a long list of renovations that are necessary and not easy. That takes time. Months, probably. You're walking away from all of it. I'm walking away from the parts that required me to be someone I'm not sure I want to be anymore. He looked at his hands, which were resting in the doorway frame. The legitimate businesses stay. They employ people. They're real things. The rest goes. That's not a small decision. No, he said, but I made it before Seong-wook was arrested. I made it. He stopped. I made it around the time someone told me to go into the morning expecting to come back. She looked at him. He looked back. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, Seoul moved through its evening sounds. A motorcycle, voices from the street below, someone's television in another unit, the base of normal life proceeding in total ignorance of the last 7 days. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay. Honestly, and I need an honest answer. I'll try. The East Wing room, she said, with no stairs, for Marcus. She watched his face. When did you think of that? He held her gaze. Before you arrived. Before Marcus arrived. Yes. You thought of it before you'd met him. I knew about him, from what you'd told Dong-hyun, and from... He paused. I pay attention to details. It's how I've survived. The detail of a brother with mobility limitations being brought into an unfamiliar building at short notice seemed like the kind of thing that should be addressed. She looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had carried her out of an alley and arranged a room for a brother he'd never met, and written contingency plans that held regardless, and made coffee badly, and told the truth even when the truth was uncomfortable, because he'd decided, at some point, that comfort was the wrong currency. That's the most human thing you've done, she said, in the whole week. That's a low bar. It was a low week. He almost smiled. It was closer than it had been in the kitchen at 3:45 in the morning. Not quite there, but closer. She ate the last segment of the tangerine. I'm going to give my statement, she said, and then I'm going home. And Marcus and I are going to figure out what the next version of things looks like. She put the peel on the counter. The money is yours. I haven't decided about the money. That's fine. It's there whenever you decide. She nodded. Then, after the operations are wound down, after the months of closing and consolidating, she looked at him directly. What does the next version of things look like for you? He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I'm not sure, he said. For the first time in a long time, I'm not sure what comes next. And it's uncomfortable. I don't do well with uncertain parameters. Nobody does, she said, but some people manage. How? They decide what they want, not strategically, just what they actually want. And then they move toward it. She looked at the counter. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least it's moving in a direction you chose. He looked at her. What do you want? He said. Now that this is over. She thought about it, not performing the thought, actually running the question. I want Marcus to have a doctor who speaks English, she said. There's a clinic in Mapo that has an English-speaking neurologist, and I've been waiting 6 months for an opening because I can't afford the self-pay rate. She paused. I want to stop delivering food at midnight. I've been doing it because the exchange rate math worked out, but I'm tired. Another pause. I want to stay in Seoul. I don't know why exactly. I came here for practical reasons, and I've stayed for practical reasons, but I think at some point the practical reasons became cover for the real reason, which is, this city is mine, she said, in a way that's hard to explain. I didn't grow up here. I don't belong here in the way people mean when they say belong. But I chose it, and choosing it makes it mine in a way that somewhere I was just born into never felt. She looked at the tangerine peel on the counter. I want to stay here. On my own terms. On your own terms, he repeated. Yes. Not contingency plans, not someone else's arrangements. No. He was quiet. Then, the clinic in Mapo, the English-speaking neurologist. Min-jae, I know someone. That's all I'm saying. I know someone who can move an appointment. He met her eyes. Not an arrangement, not contingency, just, I know someone. She looked at him. Okay, she said. One appointment. One appointment, he agreed. She gave her statement 3 days later. Park Yuna conducted it herself, in an office that was not police and not quite not police, with a recorder and a second investigator present, and a lawyer who'd been arranged for Amara through a process she didn't entirely understand, but which Dong Hyun had confirmed was legitimate and independent and not connected to Minji's money, which had been her condition. She told it from the beginning. The alley. The shot. The tattoo. The chess rook on Han Jun-seok's wrist. The way the sleeve had pulled back with the motion of raising the arm. She described it in the details she'd been carrying since the moment she saw it, because she had the kind of visual memory that held things clearly when they were connected to adrenaline, and the alley had been very connected to adrenaline. She described the photo sent to her phone, the text about Marcus's window. She described accessing the business registry, finding the filing, writing the name on the notepad. She described the car and the windshield starring and the sound of the shot arriving after. Park Yuna listened to all of it with the attention of someone for whom attention was the primary tool. She asked precise follow-up questions. Nothing leading, nothing shaped, just, and then what? And what exactly did it look like? And how much time passed between? The kind of questions that build a record the way load-bearing walls are built. At the end, she said, your statement will be submitted under protected witness provisions. Your name doesn't appear in the public record. The court will refer to you by designation only. I understand. Do you have questions? 1, Amara said. The charges, all 11 additional charges. Do they hold? They hold, Park Yuna said. The additional charges are largely financial, money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. They're built on records that don't require your testimony. Your testimony is for the original conspiracy charge and the direct threat. She paused. That charge is the one that puts him away for the longest time. So yes, your part in this matters, considerably. Amara nodded. Ms. Brooks, Park Yuna looked at her directly. What happened to you in that alley was not something you deserved or invited or failed to prevent. I want to say that plainly because people who've been through what you've been through in a short time sometimes they internalize causality that isn't theirs. She said it without softness, which made it land differently than softness would have. You were in an alley doing your job. Everything after that was someone else's war. The fact that you navigated it the way you did is not because you were part of that world. It's because you're very hard to break. Amara looked at her. At this woman who had spent 7 years being very hard to break, who had built something in the space between official and unofficial out of grief and precision and an unwillingness to accept that the record would stay incomplete. Thank you, Amara said. Park Yuna closed her notebook. The appointment in Mapo, she said. The neurologist. It's scheduled for next Thursday. Min-jae had nothing to do with it. I made the call myself. She stood. The man has certain contacts that are useful. Occasionally, so do I. She left the room. Amara sat for a moment in the recording chair and looked at the middle distance and breathed. She moved Marcus back to the apartment on a Saturday. The building looked the same. Of course, it looked the same. 8 days, not 8 years. But she stood outside it for a moment with 2 bags and her brother beside her and felt the specific quality of returning to something ordinary after something that wasn't, and understood that the ordinary had shifted, slightly, permanently, the way surfaces shift after weight has been on them. Marcus stood beside her. He was looking at the building with the same expression. Same place, he said. Same place, she agreed. Different math. She glanced at him. Different math, she confirmed. He started toward the entrance. She followed. Upstairs, the apartment was clean. Someone had been through it. Park Yuna's people or Min-jae's, she wasn't sure, But the alley smell that had clung to everything since the night she'd left in a hurry was gone. The couch depression was still there. The kitchen was exactly as she'd left it. The window over the fire escape that had always let in more cold than it should was still rattling slightly in the November wind. Marcus went to his room. She heard him moving around, settling back into his specific version of routine, the particular sounds of a man who moves carefully and has arranged his space to accommodate that. She put her bag down. She stood in the middle of her living room. The thermal bag was gone. She'd left it in the alley. She'd have to replace it if she went back to deliveries, which she wasn't going to do, which meant she needed to figure out what else, and she had time to figure out what else, which was new. She thought about Minjai. She'd said goodbye to him that morning. I was leaving Seoul for 2 days. There were meetings in Busan, things being unwound, the long machinery of dismantlement that he'd told her would take months. Donghyun was with him. The estate, he'd said, was being evaluated for sale. He was moving somewhere smaller. He'd said goodbye at the door of the safe house apartment. Not formally, not with a speech or a significant moment. He'd put his coat on, picked up the bag that Donghyun had packed, and come to where she was standing in the hallway. He'd looked at her for a moment. She'd looked back. "The neurologist," he said. "For Marcus. Let me know how it goes." "I will," she said. A pause. "And the other thing." "What other thing?" "The thing you're going to figure out. What comes after the deliveries?" She looked at him. "I'll figure it out." "I know you will." He paused. "I'd like to know. When you do." "Is that a request?" He held her gaze, steady. The steadiness of a man who had stopped performing and had no energy left for it, and maybe, possibly, no desire. "Yes." She looked at him for a moment. At the dark coat and the healed bruise on his jaw that was fading to yellow at the edges, and the bandage on his forearm still visible at the cuff. At the man who had asked, "Who shot you in an alley?" like it was a demand he intended to fulfill. "Okay," she said. "I'll let you know." He nodded. He started toward the door. "Minjai." He turned. "The East Wing room," she said. "When you sell the estate, that detail." She looked at him. "Take that forward. Whatever comes next. Take that forward." He held her gaze. Something in his face was the most unguarded it had ever been. Not open exactly. He'd never be open in the way some people were. That wasn't who he was, and she didn't need it to be. But present. Fully present. The way a room feels when every window in it is unblocked. "I will," he said. He left. 6 months later, the trial of Lee Seong-wook began in a Seoul district court and was covered by 3 major news outlets and significantly underreported given what it represented, which was the way these things tended to go. The public record referred to a protected witness by the designation W3. The protected witness's testimony was 14 pages of precise, unembellished account that Park Yuna later said was among the clearest she'd seen from a civilian in a complex conspiracy case. Han Jun-seok received partial immunity and testified for 9 hours over 2 days. He was calm on the stand in the way of a man who had made his calculation and was executing on it. His partial immunity covered 3 charges. He still faced 4 others in a separate proceeding. Park Do-hyun pled to a reduced charge and received 6 years. His lawyer called it a win. Do-hyun, from what could be parsed from press photographs taken outside the courthouse, did not look like a man who felt he'd won anything. Ryu Seo-jin received 4 years. He gave full cooperation. His lawyer argued the debt as mitigating circumstance, and the court accepted it partially. He did not make eye contact with anyone from Min Jae's side of the proceedings on the 2 days he testified, which said everything that needed to be said about the specific weight of 9 years. Lee Seong-wook was convicted on the primary conspiracy charge and 7 of the 11 additional charges. His lawyers were good. They were not good enough. He received 19 years, which Park Yuna described, in the text she sent Amara the evening of the verdict, as insufficient and irreversible. Both things at once. Amara read the text twice and understood it completely. Marcus's appointment with the neurologist was on a Thursday. He came home from it and sat down at the kitchen table and said, "She's good." "Yeah. She wants to try a different medication protocol. The current one has been managing the flares, but the management is coarser than it should be for someone my age." He put his tablet on the table. She thinks with the right adjustment, we can get the winter episodes down significantly. That's good, Amar said. It's really good, he said. It's better news than I expected. He looked at the table. I've been working with the wrong medication for 2 years, and just not knowing it because the English-speaking options were... He stopped. I know, she said. How did you get the appointment? She looked at him. Someone knew someone. He looked at her. The same someone. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Have you talked to him? A few times. She got up to put the kettle on. He's been in Busan. There's a lot to dismantle. He checks in. Marcus, I'm not saying anything. You're making a face. It's my resting face. It is absolutely not your resting face. She came back to the table. It's complicated. Most things worth anything are. He picked up his tablet. I'm just saying, the room with no stairs. He said it without looking up. That's not nothing. I know it's not nothing. Okay then. He opened his spreadsheet. Make me tea. She made him tea. Okay. The message came on a Tuesday evening in March. Not urgent, just a text, to her number, which she'd stopped being strange about him having. I'm in Seoul. This week. If you want to get coffee. She read it standing in her kitchen. She'd been in the middle of something. An application for a business development coordinator position at a Korean-American trade association that had posted an opening 6 weeks ago and which she'd been circling since she saw it, working up to the decision. The kind of job that required a different version of the math she'd been doing for 3 years. Harder math. Longer math. She put her phone face down on the counter. She picked it up again. She wrote back, Thursday works. I know a place. The response came in 40 seconds. Okay. Thursday was 3 days away. She went back to the application. She filled in the section on international business experience, which she had, and the section on cross-cultural communication competency, which she also had, and the section on problem-solving under pressure, which she had in quantities she hadn't fully accounted for before this week. She submitted it at 11 p.m. She closed the laptop and looked at the depression in the couch cushion. Still there, still shaped like her, still the most honest furniture in the apartment, and thought about alleyways and east-facing windows, and the particular persistence of things that begin in the wrong place and end up being exactly where they were supposed to be. She didn't have a word for what that was. She didn't need one tonight. The cafe was small. Mapo district, 3 blocks from the neurologist's clinic, which was either coincidence or not, and she didn't examine it too closely. She got there first, which she'd intended, and sat at a corner table with a window that looked out onto the street where Seoul moved through its Tuesday rhythms in the ordinary complicated way of a city that contained multitudes and noticed none of them. She ordered coffee. She didn't look at the door. She heard it open. She heard him before she saw him. Not his voice, just the particular quality of attention in the room shifting, the way a room shifts when someone enters who has spent a long time learning to fill space without demanding it. He sat down across from her. He looked different and exactly the same. The coat was similar. The collar was open 1 button. The bruise on his jaw was long gone. He looked like a man who had been doing something difficult for 6 months and had not quite arrived yet at the other side of it, which she understood because she recognized the texture of it. He looked at her. She looked back. How's Marcus? He said. Better, she said. The medication is better. He's actually better. Something shifted in his face. Good. He says the room with no stairs wasn't nothing. Min-jae looked at her steadily. He's right. The coffee came. They were quiet for a moment, both hands around their cups, the cafe moving around them in its unremarkable Thursday morning way. The estate sold, he said. Where are you living? Somewhere smaller. Yongsan, actually. He looked at his cup. It's close to where... He stopped. I know where Yongsan is, she said. Yes. He looked up. The operations are almost fully closed, 3 more months approximately. The legitimate businesses are being consolidated under a holding company that I'll run cleanly or not at all. He said it like a man who has decided something and is reporting the decision, not defending it. It's a different life. I don't know yet what it feels like from the inside. What does it feel like so far? Quieter than I expected, he said. Not empty, just quieter. She nodded. I applied for a job, she said. He looked at her. What kind? Business development, trade association, Korean American. She wrapped her hands around her cup. It would use things I actually know how to do and pay me to do them instead of the other way around. Will you get it? I don't know. The application was good. The experience section was, she almost smiled, unusual. He looked at her. Something in his face had the quality of the pre-dawn kitchen, of 3:45 a.m., and cold coffee, and the specific honesty of people who have run out of anything but the truth. I thought about what you said, he said, about deciding what you want, not strategically. And I want... He stopped. He set his cup down. He looked at her the way he had in the alley when he'd asked who shot you, like a man asking a question he already intends to answer. I want to sit across from you at a table that doesn't have a map of soul on it and talk about something that isn't operational. This is a table without a map of soul on it, she said. Yes, he said. It is. She looked at him, at the man who had been feared by more people than she would ever meet, and had been changed, not repaired, not completed, not made whole in the way stories sometimes promised, but changed, which was different and more honest and harder, by 8 days in November that had cost both of them things they hadn't finished accounting for. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Outside, Seoul went about its enormous, indifferent life. Inside the cafe, two people sat across from each other in the ordinary morning light and said nothing for a moment, which was the right thing to say, and which required nothing from either of them except to be present and to choose to remain so. That was all. That was, it turned out, enough. She went back to the application. She filled in the section on international business experience, which she had, and the section on cross-cultural communication competency, which she also had, and the section on problem-solving under pressure, which she had in quantities she hadn't fully accounted for before this week. She submitted it at 11 p.m. She closed the laptop and looked at the depression in the couch cushion. Still there, still shaped like her, still the most honest furniture in the apartment, and thought about alleyways and east-facing windows, and the particular persistence of things that begin in the wrong place and end up being exactly where they were supposed to be. She didn't have a word for what that was. She didn't need one tonight. The cafe was small. Mapo district, 3 blocks from the neurologist's clinic, which was either coincidence or not, and she didn't examine it too closely. She got there first, which she'd intended, and sat at a corner table with a window that looked out onto the street where Seoul moved through its Tuesday rhythms in the ordinary, complicated way of a city that contained multitudes and noticed none of them. She ordered coffee. She didn't look at the door. She heard it open. She heard him before she saw him, not his voice, just the particular quality of attention in the room shifting, the way a room shifts when someone enters who has spent a long time learning to fill space without demanding it. He sat down across from her. He looked different and exactly the same. The coat was similar. The collar was open 1 button. The bruise on his jaw was long gone. He looked like a man who had been doing something difficult for 6 months and had not quite arrived yet at the other side of it, which she understood because she recognized the texture of it. He looked at her. She looked back. "How's Marcus?" he said. "Better," she said. "The medication is better. He's actually better." Something shifted in his face. "Good." "He says the room with no stairs wasn't nothing." Min-jae looked at her steadily. "He's right." The coffee came. They were quiet for a moment, both hands around their cups, the cafe moving around them in its unremarkable Thursday morning way. "The estate sold," he said. "Where are you living?" "Somewhere smaller. Yongsan, actually." He looked at his cup. "It's close to where—" He stopped. "I know where Yongsan is," she said. "Yes." He looked up. "The operations are almost fully closed, 3 more months approximately. The legitimate businesses are being consolidated under a holding company that I'll run cleanly or not at all." He said it like a man who has decided something and is reporting the decision, not defending it. "It's a different life. I don't know yet what it feels like from the inside." "What does it feel like so far?" "Quieter than I expected," he said. "Not empty, just quieter." She nodded. "I applied for a job," she said. He looked at her. What kind? Business development. Trade association. Korean American. She wrapped her hands around her cup. It would use things I actually know how to do and pay me to do them instead of the other way around. Will you get it? I don't know. The application was good. The experience section was, she almost smiled, unusual. He looked at her. Something in his face had the quality of the pre-dawn kitchen, of 3:45 a.m., and cold coffee, and the specific honesty of people who have run out of anything but the truth. I thought about what you said, he said, about deciding what you want, not strategically. And I want... He stopped. He set his cup down. He looked at her the way he had in the alley when he'd asked who shot you, like a man asking a question he already intends to answer. I want to sit across from you at a table that doesn't have a map of Seoul on it and talk about something that isn't operational. This is a table without a map of Seoul on it, she said. Yes, he said. It is. She looked at him, at the man who had been feared by more people than she would ever meet, and had been changed, not repaired, not completed, not made whole in the way stories sometimes promised, but changed, which was different and more honest and harder, by 8 days in November that had cost both of them things they hadn't finished accounting for. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Outside, Seoul went about its enormous, indifferent life. Inside the cafe, two people sat across from each other in the ordinary morning light and said nothing for a moment, which was the right thing to say, and which required nothing from either of them except to be present and to choose to remain so. That was all. That was, it turned out, enough.